The Nintendo Switch 2 is now the fastest selling console of all time in the US. Yes, you heard that right. The news just broke today. So in this video, I want to talk about the numbers, talk about how this happened, and talk a little bit about the future of the Nintendo Switch 2. So it was reported today that the Nintendo Switch 2 sold 2.4 million units in the first 3 months after release in the US, in America, and that's more than any other console of all time sold in its first 3 months of release. Now, it actually dethroned the previous bestseller, the PS4, by about 5%. So the Switch 2 sold 5% more units than the PS4 did within its first 3 months of release. But what's shocking here is that it actually sold more than 70% more units than the Switch 1 sold on its release in the first 3 months. So completely destroying the number of units that the Switch 1 has sold and just showing how much more successful the Switch 2 has been so far upon its release. Now, there's a lot I want to talk about here, but let's start with how did we get here? How did the Switch do so well? And how did the Switch sell so many units? And the first thing here, I think, is just pent-up demand. I think there was a long wait for the Switch 2. I think the Switch 1 had so many great games, so many great fans, so many people who love the console that there was just a huge demand for the Switch 2 upon release. And because the Switch 2 was so similar to the Switch 1 in a lot of ways, I think fans and consumers had an expectation of what they were getting, essentially just a better Switch 1. And to be honest, I think that's what a lot of people wanted. So I think the first reason why the Switch did so well was because of that pent-up demand for the Switch 2 on release. Now, the next reason why I think the Switch 2 was able to succeed in this 2.4 million units and maybe completely destroy the Switch 1 is because they were prepared. They had the units available, they had the consoles and the manufacturing ready and set up. And maybe that's a place they were lacking on the Switch 1. I do recall it being a lot harder to get a Switch 1 upon release. In my case, I was able to get a Switch 2, which I got here on day one. And while it was a challenge to get that day one pickup, after I had picked it up, I still saw Switch 2s were available in stores for a couple days after the initial release. So they definitely had a lot of units available. And I think that's a big reason why the Switch 2 was able to shatter the PS4 record and shatter the original Switch 1 record was because they had these units available. They were prepared for their launch. And that's something I want to see more consoles do because the PS5 launch was absolutely terrible, super hard to get your hands on a PS5. So Nintendo did it right here. And I think now they are starting to see the fruits of their labor by having those consoles ready to ship and be picked up by consumers. Now, next, another big factor to why I think the console sold so many units was the hype around Mario Kart World. Nintendo knew what they were doing with that game. They were pulling on the heartstrings of fans for generations by flouting a new Mario Kart game in front of their faces. And to be honest, that's a big reason why I picked up my Switch 2 so fast is because I had a lot of hype, a lot of high expectations for Mario Kart World. Now, did the game live up to those expectations? I'm not so sure, but that's a video for another time. But I think when people saw Mario Kart World, the thought of having this open world Mario Kart game, the graphics, all the video, the marketing around that game, I think that got people really excited for the Switch 2 launch and really helped push the Switch 2 over the finish line to get that 2.4 million units sold. Now, that's some of the reasons why I think the Switch 2 was able to be so successful here and, sell so many units. But I want to talk about why this is so surprising, at least to me. And some of the main reasons are that the Switch 2, while it had a lot going for it, it also had a lot going against it. We had the bad economic conditions, we had come out of COVID, we had tariffs come under the president, and there was just so much going on that kind of made it shaky with the Switch 2 release. And that really is what surprises me so much about this is that despite all those conditions, despite, the high price of the Switch 2 console, the high price of the Switch 2 games, the game key cards, just all the things the Switch 2 had going against it, it was still able to come out and break records. And I think that's just a testimony to how good Nintendo is at marketing, how much consumers and fans love Nintendo. And I also think a big reason for this is that Nintendo did the best thing possible with the Switch 2 release, and that was to make it backwards compatible. So if the Switch 2 didn't have backwards compatibility, I think we would see a lot less sales, especially early on sales, because besides Donkey Kong Bonanza, besides Mario Kart World, and a few other games, there's still really not that much to play on the Switch 2. But I think with so many, Nintendo fans having a Switch 1 library, having a collection of Switch 1 games, and being able to play that on the Switch 2, I think that really just sealed the deal and made a lot of people want to go and pick up the Switch 2 as soon as possible, myself included, because let's be real, the Switch 2 is really just an upgraded Switch 1, so we all knew what we were getting. And again, being able to play the Switch 1 library on the Switch 2, I mean, that was the best thing Nintendo could have did. And I think that's really helped the sales here. Now, going forward, I think we really need to keep our eyes on the Switch 2 and see how it continues to do. I mean, this is only the first 3 months, so the big question is, can the Switch 2 keep up with this number of sales? Are we going to see the chart continue to do a steady climb? Is it going to taper off? Is it going to come back down? Is it going to crash? We don't know. But I think things are looking really good for the Switch 2, especially considering that there's going to be a lot of big games coming out over the next couple years. We've got the new Metroid Prime. It's only a matter of time before we get a new Zelda. We could even get a new Mario. So there's just so much potential here with the Switch 2, and I think the Switch 2 is going to continue to outperform. I think more and more people are going to be picking it up. This Christmas, I think, is going to be a lot of sales for the Switch 2, especially if they have some kind of bundles. So just tons of potential here, and it's really great to see that the Switch 2 and the video game industry in general is thriving because, as people, as consumers, as gamers, it's great to have the industry thriving because that means we're going to have a lot more games to play and we're going to have Nintendo around for a long time. I am curious to see how the Sony PS6 performs on its release, even though we're a few years out from that. It will be very interesting to see if it can compete with the Switch 2 sales. So that's it. Thanks for joining. I just really wanted to highlight how well the Switch 2 is doing, share this news with you because, again, I think it's absolutely incredible that the Switch 2 is performing so well. To be the best-selling console of all time within the first 3 months in the US is a huge accomplishment and a testament to Nintendo, to their product, to their marketing. So if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. Let me know, did you pick up a Switch 2? Do you like the console? And do you think Nintendo is going to keep selling units at this pace? So that's it. Have a good day.